Today, I'm going to be going over the topic of double jeopardy. Double jeopardy is a person's right not to be tried twice for the same crime. I'm going to start out with discussing its constitutional basis and why it is a protection afforded by the Constitution. So, double jeopardy can be found in the aptly named Double Jeopardy Clause of the Fifth Amendment, which can be read as no person shall be subject for the same offense to be put twice in jeopardy of life or limb. The founders thought that this was necessary to put into the original Bill of Rights as part of a more general protection afforded to citizens in criminal procedure. They didn't want the government to be able to continuously retry a person who they presumed guilty, and so the founders disallowed the state having another kick at the cat, if you will. There are 4 protections embedded within the Double Jeopardy Clause that prohibit the state from retrying after an acquittal, retrying after a conviction, and retrying after certain type of mistrials. And also, they don't allow the state to punish multiple times for the same crime. So the first case we're going to look at is Blockberger v. United States, which deals with the same offense portion of the Double Jeopardy Clause. The defendant in this case was charged with multiple violations of the Harrison Narcotics Act after he sold drugs on 2 separate occasions to the same person. Blockberger's defense was that the 2 charges arose from a single continuous event, and therefore he could only be charged with a single crime. The court ruled otherwise, stating that the applicable rule is that where the same act or transaction constitutes a violation of 2 distinct statutory provisions, the test to be applied to determine whether there are 2 offenses or only one is whether each provision requires proof of an additional fact which the other does not. This means that although the state is able to charge the defendant twice for 2 separate instances of the same crime, or even charge a person under 2 separate statutes for separate elements of the same crime, they can't charge someone under 2 statutes if one is wholly included within the other. These types of charges are sometimes called lesser included offenses, and for example, it could be how residential burglary is a lesser included offense to aggravated residential burglary, as one is wholly encapsulated by the other. This distinction is complicated a little bit by the ruling of United States v. Lanza. Lanza was a defendant living in Washington State during the beginning of the Prohibition era. After violating the Prohibition, Lanza was charged under both a Washington State statute and also under a federal statute. The federal charge included several elements of the crime that were also included in the Washington crime, which would make it seem to fail the Blockberger test. The court instead ruled that due to a person living in both jurisdictions, they can be charged under both statutes. A person living in a jurisdiction enjoys things like the police force and the maintenance of road, which are provided by the state, while also living in the federal jurisdiction, which provides things like environmental and military protection. Since they enjoy the benefits of each of these jurisdictions, they should also be held liable to their rules. This introduced the idea of dual sovereignty, and the idea behind it can even be extended to allow for multiple different states to charge for the same crime. This seems paradoxical to the Blockberger ruling in that even if the statutes are completely the same as each other, a person can still be charged under both based purely on jurisdiction. Ball v. United States is interesting on a few fronts because it deals with multiple different defendants in unique circumstances. Millard Ball and his brother John Ball, along with Robert Boutwell, were out on trial for murder. Miller was acquitted while John and Robert were convicted. John and Robert appealed the Supreme Court to the Supreme Court, and the court reversed the conviction because the indictment was insufficient. All three were then retried and found guilty, and they all appealed again to the Supreme Court. Millard's conviction was reversed while the court upheld John and Robert's. They ruled that even though he was charged under a faulty indictment, Millard Ball was still under jeopardy. Conversely, they found that the prior convictions being reversed on appeal does not bar the state from retrying John and Robert. Double jeopardy is definitely a lot more complicated than it may seem on its surface, and the court prefers to take it on a case-by-case basis, mainly due to the fact that they don't hear many cases involving double jeopardy. So it's unlikely that in the future a more rigid test comes out to define this legal concept.